Good morning. Good
Hello.
morning. It's good morning, Monique. It's Wednesday Wisdom, and we are here with the beautiful Monique Peters, and who is from Brainwise Learning. And Monique and I met at a networking event.
Yes.
Actually, not that long ago. Actually,
It was quite recent.
yeah.
And it was at the Alternative Awards dinner that we had.
That's right. We did too. Yeah, that was really fun, wasn't it?
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And so Monique and I got talking over lunch about what she does. And I'm like, oh, you've got to come on to Wednesday Wisdom and share with the community about, because we got talking about neuroscience and brainwave frequencies and synapses and all sorts of stuff, all the stuff that I love. And so
well on there.
Tell us a little bit about what it is you do with Brainwise Learning.
So what I do is I'm a learning coach. So what I do is I support people in taking their learning journey. So if they have problems with attention, memory, the way they process language and communication, so that includes reading as well as writing and critical thinking, and their mindset. So I have a program that it's a neuroscience program. It's online, and it actually improves their ability to pay attention. It improves their ability to remember more things. It speeds up the way the brain processes language sounds, so that they can hear things more clearly and remember more of what they hear. Things like following instructions better, that sort of thing. And because I work with a few children with learning challenges who are used to avoiding learning because it's a very painful experience for them, that's why I'm increasing my growth mindset coaching to help them get over those mindset hurdles of wanting to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And get them out of their comfort zone and get them learning again, increase their confidence. So what I usually see is their confidence improves. They're wanting to approach learning in a much more confident way, which helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so much in what you just said that I want to address. So first of all, we have been, conditioned through the generations and the way technology has evolved, and these great little gadgets that we've got. We have been conditioned to have such a short attention span, right? And so the kids these days, just like the amount of ADHD that's coming in is just rampant because there's no engagement and concentration. That we've got an outdated school system that doesn't cater to the different types of learning that that's around. So I'd love you to address that too. But also, as you were talking, I'm like, so this is actually, like, I'm wondering if you also work with, particularly, so I was thinking, kids, but then, I'm assuming you'd be working with, generational disease. So, Parkinson's and all that sort of stuff. But as you were talking, I was thinking this would be the type of thing, if you want to level up in your business and move into leadership and an influencer, then having more communication skills, concentration, memory, retaining memory, these are all the things that the skills that you need to actually implement if you're going to be, creating, a company or whatever, and you're like leveling up in your business. Yeah.
Well, that's very true. So a key part of my journey and my confidence, because I started my business without having any business skills whatsoever, which was not the way to do it. But anyway,
yeah. It's interesting, and you can be really good at what you do, right? But then you've got to learn all this other stuff on the side. It's like, I've got to write content. I've got to
And a big part for me was confidence, was having the confidence to step in that role, and speaking is a very big part of that. But I have a headset which singers love, but also keynote speakers and language learners love, because what it does is it uses your voice to improve the auditory processing pathways in your brain as well. So kids will use it to read out loud, and they'll use it in speech therapy. But I've used it to rehearse my presentations, and I've improved my speaking, and it makes things flow a lot better. So
Yeah.
with the constant use, because as you know, with the neural pathways, it takes a lot of practice, practice,
Yeah.
practice. But it actually, that's what builds the confidence. So
Yeah.
it comes out as confidence.
That's awesome. I want to hear more about that afterwards. But so I want you just to go back a little bit to the dual pathways that you were just talking about, because not everyone's into neuroscience and even knows what synapses and, neural pathways are. So can you just give us a little bit of a background?
Sure.
Yeah.
So because I know you have a lot of neuroscience content in your program, and
yeah.
you identify with it really well. It basically means that the simple explanation of it is whatever you practice, you get good at. So when you're practicing something, you're actually putting a demand on your brain, and you're telling your brain that this is really important. This is really important that I get good at this. So it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. The brain doesn't decide that. It decides. So when you're starting a good habit, like studying and taking notes and things like that, your brain's saying, oh, this is important, so I need to get better at this skill. And what it does is physiologically, it not only builds the pathways and connects the senses, the synapses, but it also adds a substance called myelin. And that's an oily
Yes.
substance, and that's where your omega-3 fish oil comes in. So that fatty substance, if there are any electricians out there, knows that those electrical potentials
Yeah. As a conduit.
on the fatty pathways. So that makes the efficiency in the brain a lot better. It conserves energy. And that's why when you're repeating things and telling the brain that this is important, the brain thinks, oh, I'm spending too much energy doing this. I better line those pathways with that oil so I can make those signals travel faster. And what we see that translate to in our daily life is grace. So, when the example I often use is a child learning piano. And at first you might see their face turn, and grimace, and their fingers are going all over the place. But with that practice, all that becomes lovely and refined, and it looks a lot more graceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the more you practice something, or the more, because our subconscious says yes to everything it's told, right? And as you said, it doesn't know the difference between good or bad. We make that judgment and assessment.
That's right.
So,
We are in charge of our own brains.
yeah. And so, you could be doing something that's a bad habit, and the body's just going, yes, this is what we need to do. Yeah.
And this is why, children who don't grow up in ideal environments, they're more comfortable with whatever they've learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is where it's so important to give children, I don't think there's any a good or bad. I don't like to use that, but
no, but a different way.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So there was actually a movie called Chappie. I don't know if you know it.
I vaguely remember it. It was a robot, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting. It was exactly explaining neuroplasticity.
Okay, I haven't seen it for ages.
Yeah, it was showing how that robot with its artificial intelligence ended up in a suboptimal environment.
Yeah.
It picked up those habits, and how that played through its life.
I have to go back and watch it, because I remember when it first came out, watching it. So I'd have to go back and watch it. And so how do you work with, like, you've got a course that you run?
Yeah, so that's an online program. So my son had learning difficulties at school. He could not remember what his teacher was telling him. He later told me that he couldn't actually understand what his teacher was telling him. But he didn't know that back then. He couldn't work all that out. All he knew was that, school wasn't working for him. And he, did his best to avoid as much of it as possible. So but that was already happening by the time he was in year 3. So, and he could read, so I wasn't looking for dyslexia at the time, but I never realised, I did much later, made the connection between his low comprehension and the fact what he was doing was having to work so hard to decode all the information. So he was having trouble matching the sounds of the letters to the actual symbol of the letter.
Yeah.
This is what auditory processing disorder typically does. So you might have the teacher might say something like, okay, children, sit down, open your books at page 23 and do the test, questions 1 to 4. And he would not be able to remember all that. So he would ask the child next to him. Sometimes they would answer him. Most of the time they'd tell him to get lost because they don't have the patience for that. And so it's what started off as difficulties soon becomes social issues and bullying and
Absolutely. And then behavioural issues because the teacher's saying, stop talking to the guy next to you.
yes,
Yeah.
and getting in trouble all the time. Even the other children would, there were some boys in the class that wanted him to be in trouble all the time, so they would dob him in for something he couldn't do. And because he would get nervous, he'd lose his eloquence with speech. So I wrote an article about this actually, and because the boys were saying, "Oh, Miss, he did this and he did this," and he'd be saying, "Oh, but I didn't," and so it's easy for a teacher, I think, to believe. It's natural, I suppose, to believe who was more eloquent and who was more understandable in a situation like that.
Yeah.
So, but in the end, my son decided that he would just admit to whatever they said because it was easier than having to explain. So,
oh my gosh, how many kids? I'm just thinking back at school now as well, like how many kids were doing, these days I'm hoping that schools have got a little bit more understanding of this sort of stuff. No?
I'm not hearing
still
it.
No.
No, in fact, with COVID and all the teacher shortages and the chaos of the last couple of years, it's actually probably worse.
Yeah, wow. Because I'm just feeling into that, and as you say it, you've got the two types of kid, well, more maybe, but I'm just looking at the kid that withdraws and suppresses, and like your son sounds like that's what he did, and the other that would distract and become the class clown.
Yes.
To distract from the fact that they weren't actually.
They're all ways of masking their difficulties with learning, And it's when you talked earlier about the generational thing, it's quite often, the parents aren't really aware that they don't make the connection to the struggles they had at school until they've had a really good chat with them, and then they say, "Oh, hang on, that was me."
Yeah. So just keeping on the theme of kids at school, if there's women in here that are listening, and this goes out to my other channels, so men and women, if there's anyone on here that may like be alarms going, I'm wondering about my son or my daughter. So is there particular behaviours that you can look at and then talk to your children about? Or
definitely. Look, a mother will often suspect things beforehand, but when it gets to learning to read time, if they're struggling with learning to read and especially with spelling, then it's a good idea to have a look at their auditory processing skills. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, there's not a lot of awareness about auditory processing disorder. So the typical thing to do is I remember my experience was, I would say to the teacher that I was concerned about things, and they would say things, "Oh, he's just a boy, he's just not as fast as the others," all that sort of thing. So that was the first couple of years. After that, I started to sort of just comparing it to my own schooling. So the schooling from my generation was very different to what it is now, and we actually had a lot more repetition in our curriculum. So we used to say the times tables every day. We used to do dictation, which apparently they don't even do anymore.
No.
And that's the ability that where the teacher says a paragraph and you have to write it down, but you have to get all the punctuation right, the spelling right, all those sort of things, and they don't even do that anymore. So having that repetition, so I would invent my own worksheets for my son just so he could get the repetition, because I was sensing that, but I didn't know anything about neuroscience then. It wasn't until I read that book, The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Doidge,
Yeah.
when I realised, I thought, oh, that's definitely what's going on. And but see, even these days, if you want to go and get an assessment for auditory processing disorder, it's a really complicated process, because there's a 2-year wait, 1 to 2
Oh, wow.
for speech pathology, and even for assessments. You know, assessments are very, very, very expensive. They can be $1,200–$1,400, and in my opinion, they're great. And I would not say not to get an assessment, but you can jump on my program. You don't need assessments to do mine.
Yeah.
And
I mean, your program, it's not just for that particular disorder either, right? So,
no, it's for the whole auditory processing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I not only have children who were struggling to read doing my program, but I recently had a 72-year-old lady who had a stroke, and she was recovering her language function.
Yeah.
I also have a young fellow in his 30s who has MS. So yeah, any kind of loss of language function, even children who are learning in English as a second language, you know, because their brain has been coded for other language sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though like multilingual children are very lucky, because they get extra pathways in their brain that
Yeah.
language children don't get, but we still need to code their brain to be able to learn in English,
Yeah.
read in English. Yeah.
It's interesting you said that, because I use that as an example. I don't know if you've heard that in the course, right? But that, you know, whatever the behaviours are that are in our family, we're being coded in with those behaviours in our subconscious. And, you know, like we don't learn Chinese when we're living in an English family, right? We
Exactly.
like that's what's coded in. And
Exactly
so
right.
yeah, if you grew up in a family where everyone woke up in the morning and smashed each other over the head with a hammer, that's what you thought was normal, right?
That's
So
right.
yeah.
And that's what becomes familiar,
Yeah.
and comfortable for
And
you.
comfortable. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's your comfort zone, and that's what you resist to change when you think, oh, it's time to change that.
Yeah.
It becomes more difficult. So
So how long does your course go? Like, is it tailored specifically to individuals, or
no,
how
it's
does it work?
generally 3 months you start to see results. So
Yeah.
in the program you'll do exercises online on the computer. And it's more about listening. So you might listen to hundreds and hundreds of beeps, and you have to put them in the right order. And that's about sequencing. Sequencing is a very important skill in being able to understand what people are saying to you. So another one is being able to hold different language sounds in your mind while you're looking for other sounds. So it's kind of like the game of concentration or memory, you know, where you turn over the card and make a match. But this is with language sounds. So you might have to hold a sound like ba in your mind while you're listening to da, la, sa, ka. And remember, I'm looking for ba. And then when you find
Yeah.
it, you find it. But working memory is a very important part of auditory processing skills. So you need to be able to hold those sounds in your mind long enough to work out how to do with them. And that's the sort of skill where if you look at reading, to remember what you've read previously, like on the previous page or on the previous paragraph, to connect it to the information that you're now putting in. So we take a lot of these things for granted. Our brain is actually working incredibly hard.
I remember when, you know, I had a brain tumor removed, right? And everything just flowed extremely well, as everyone knows. And I was out of hospital quite quickly, but I was out. I was allowed to be discharged so quickly that the last day they had to put me back up to the ward because I wasn't allowed to be discharged from the trauma ward. And they said, oh, you know, we just realised you haven't had a what is it that they no, you know, like they do a test to see how you're functioning and comprehending and all that sort of stuff. I can't remember the specialist that does that.
A neurologist?
No, it wasn't a neurologist.
Speech
No, no, it was like not a physiotherapist, but a
occupational therapist.
Occupational therapist. That's it. So I had been flying colours with everything, and it was like 2 or 3 days. I think it was 3 days after the operation, and my comprehension had just started to kick in. That as my pathways were trying to work out, oh my gosh, we've had the head open and whatever, and it was the only test. Like I only just passed it. I got 51 out of 100, and I was devastated. Like, because like it was easy, simple things like remember these 5 things. I'm going to tell you these 5 things, and then we do all these other things, and then I had to remember those 5 things afterwards, and to not remember them, like to only remember 3 of them and couldn't remember the other 2. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Is it, you don't realize until you lose it.
Yep.
How important it is for the brain to be functioning in 100, as optimal as possible. So
yes. Well, I once worked with a young lady, so she was in her 30s, and she'd had some trauma to the brain, and she went through the program, and from going through it afterwards, she said to me, wow, I realise now that I learnt to read by sight and not phonetically. And she'd had a few little struggles with reading, but she was also a very determined person, so her memory happened to be quite good for remembering the shapes of words, but not knowing the sounds that are involved in making up words is actually very hard for our brain, because reading is not natural. So reading is a cultural imposition, basically, that we've forced on our brains, and without it we wouldn't have been able to build houses, bridges, furniture, all that sort of thing. It's really important, but it's just not natural for the brain. The brain didn't evolve to read, and so evolutionary speaking, some of us are still catching up with all of that, but it's good to know that the repetition can help. And like in the school curriculum, we don't give enough repetition for kids like that, because that's dyslexia basically. It's the brain is still catching up with this modern imposition of reading.
Mm-hmm.
So but so when she learnt that all those sounds are sorry, I'm just trying to work out the best way to put it. The brain spent hundreds of thousands of years working with sound and listening, speaking and listening. The reading thing is only something in the last 5,000 years that we've done, and really only in the last 100 years has it been something that basically most people do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so unnatural, and we need to honour in the teaching of reading. We need to honour that speaking and listening part with the language sounds before we impose this reading business on the brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Monique, how do people get in contact with you if they're interested? Like I can imagine that there might be a lot of people that are having bells go off about their children all of a sudden. And like even adult or elderly parents that may be interested in supporting them as they age.
Yep.
So how do people get in contact with you?
So I've got a lovely website. So it's Brainwise Learning, which is www.brainwiselearning.com.au. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. But on the website, there's lots of information. There's some really cool videos to watch. I've got a lovely video of a baby who was born with 2% of a brain. Young Noah.
Wow.
Oh, it's an incredible story. I get a bit teary every time I talk about it, because his parents were told to abort. They knew he was going to have spina bifida, and this was the hydrocephalus, where the water goes inside the brain.
Yeah.
And they weren't expecting him to live, even though when he was born. So they were preparing his funeral. But he gave out an almighty cry, and Mum thought, no, he's telling me he wants to live. So what they did was they massaged him, lots of touching.
Yeah.
lots
Yeah.
of, yeah.
I'm a baby massage instructor, so I know that the
Beautiful.
neural pathways that,
Yes, it's
yeah,
so important. And
yeah,
what
and the
happened,
vagus nerve, yeah.
definitely. And what happened was, and then still a lot of movement and everything. He had to have a scan about when he was 3 for something else. And they weren't expecting this, but 85% of a brain had grown.
Oh my gosh.
In this film, you can see it from his scan that they did when he was born to when he was 3 years old. And there's this beautiful brain there, and it's just,
Oh my gosh.
and it shows the doctors saying, we still have a lot to learn.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's just
So from my, like, that's the super conscious, right? That's it going, oh, okay, this is, bringing the codes in and bringing,
well, it's
creating.
also that genetic, cultural thing as well, because in years gone by, they would have fed him and made him very comfortable, but they would have treated him very delicately and
Oh,
moved him, and if he lived, he would have just just been lying there.
vegetable, yeah.
Anything going on. So the fact that they picked him up and massaged him and moved him, so that was the brain responding to, like, oh, okay, I've got to move. So
Yeah.
so that I can live.
It reminds me of a study that we could just talk forever, you and I. It reminds me of a study when I was doing infant massage instructing, and they had done 3 different test groups of babies, and one they didn't massage at all, and so they were all in incubators and premature and having to use the breathing apparatus and whatever.
Yeah.
So one group they didn't massage at all, one they did light touch on, and one they did the firm baby massage, right? And the ones that they didn't touch at all and the ones that they had done light touch with, the one with the light touch actually had to stay longer.
Wow.
Because it was irritating the nerves, right?
Oh.
Yeah, it was irritating the nerves pathways. But the ones that had done the baby massage and the firm touch, they were off the incubator, like out of the incubators and breathing properly and out of the hospital in half the time of the other 2. Yeah,
beautiful.
because of that, what you're talking about, that that connection from pathways and just blood supply, and the body's starting to recognize we're alive, and
yes,
yeah.
Well, I often
Very
like to
interesting.
talk about, it is, and I often like to talk about how it used to be survival that put that demand on us to get out of our comfort zone and survive. And that's what made our brain grow. I mean, anything, we kind of split with jellyfish, I think, on the evolutionary line. So anything more than a jellyfish does is, and that's movement. It's all movement based.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was actually reading about jellyfish the other day, and they do have a neural network. It's like they kind of have a brain all over their body, a very primitive brain all over their body, which is really, really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But they have the neural network all through their bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got nothing to do with their sting and their venom. No.
That's
okay.
separate evolution.
Yeah. Separate process altogether.
Very clever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's times like this that I go, how can people not believe in some sort of higher source or intelligence? Like, the way things have been put together is just extraordinary. Whatever we're in is just extreme intelligence. Like, you got to give it credit, right?
Oh, definitely. Most definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Monique. It was lovely to chat. And when we finish, we'll get you to put all of your content details, your website and any of the links, so people can get in contact with you down below, so that, definitely jump in and get in contact with Monique and check out the website. If you've got anyone young or old, in the middle, whatever, that or you're a business owner like me that's thinking, oh, actually this is to support me in advancing in, you know, what I'm doing and changing the world and everything, right?
Definitely.
So jump on the links and check out what Monique's doing. Thank you so much, Monique. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I really love what you do. And I love where we connect. It's just awesome.
Yeah, it's been great. Definitely need to have another lunch, I reckon. We could just chat forever.
I'll be at the next meeting.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Good.
Take care, everyone.
You too. Bye.